So we are in an empty shop unit in the middle of Priory Meadows in Hastings. It's an empty shop unit that's been vacant for like a year or so now. And because the town didn't want empty spaces, they spoke to a company called Hypha Studios, who actually speak with landlords, and they find ways to use the spaces so that they can be opened up again, so the shutters aren't permanently closed, so that the spaces can come alive. And it was considered that using it as an art space was going to be the best for community engagement and best to just kind of promote culture in the town, really. We have all sorts of people coming through. There's a number of local people that just kind of are coming about doing their shopping or whatnot, or like today, escaping the rain. But because of the time of year that is, there's quite a lot of holiday makers as well, because we're in a seaside town here. There's people just kind of milling around. Again, when they can't go down to the front or when they want a break from being by the sea there, they come up into the shopping centre here and have a little wander around. So we get all sorts of people. Whilst I've been in the space here, I've had kind of students come down and teachers, artists as well, who kind of see the space and want to come and engage, and then people with young kids as well. And the kids kind of tend to come near the door and they want to know what's going on, and maybe their carers don't necessarily want to engage in an arts environment, and they kind of quickly hurry them along, and sometimes they let them come in and we have conversations and whatnot. But it's a real mix. It's a mix of everybody. I think that was the real benefit of it being an open studio, is that I could actually engage with people directly. People could be curious, not because there are pieces of art on the wall which can be weird for people, it's kind of unfamiliar for some people, but to actually have someone in there going through the process, actually applying paint, it's a much more kind of primitive activity that anyone can engage in. And while they may not understand what's on the wall, the act of applying paint to the canvas is fairly direct and fairly simple. So if they want to come in and ask a question, or if they would just want to talk about what I'm using, what colours I'm using, what type of paint I'm using, it's a very easy step into it, that because I'm here, they can come and ask the simple questions, and there's no pressure, and it's a shopping centre where they feel comfortable. They're not going into like an art space, as it were. They're not having to go to a gallery. It's just here, ready to go, and they can come and engage immediately. There is an opportunity to buy it, but we're not here to sell the work. We're here to talk about art. We're here to kind of give people the opportunity to see things that they wouldn't necessarily go and see. It's kind of proper art in a non-conforming arts environment, you know. You're encouraged to engage with the work rather than just consider it to be a commodity. You know, we aren't here as salespeople, we are here as artists and creatives trying to engage the community in looking at artwork and engaging with the process of making artwork. When it's something other than, when it's something alien, I think people do just tend to be like, well, that's not for me, I'm going to move away. And I mean, there are subjects that maybe I would do the same thing, and art is one of those for people. You know, it can be and has been built up to be this quite kind of either kind of elusive or quite enigmatic thing. And especially with abstract work, it can be really quite difficult. There's not just a nice picture of a field to look at. It does take a little bit more than that. It is a much more considered approach. I would say that the role of the gallery here is to engage people in the local art scene. So this space is being run by Hastings Art School, who are an organisation aimed at working with local artists who want to expand their creative practice and expand their professional development. And so this space is to say, we have artists here working in Hastings who are, you know, they're tradespeople or business people. They are creatives who are trying to make a life for themselves outside of the standard 9-to-5 job. They're here and they want to do something with themselves. And so we are encouraging people to come together and celebrate that and work with it. So this is, although a solo show for me, it really is look at how the school helped me develop and grow as an artist. So to come into that collaborative art school environment meant that I was surrounded by people that were actively engaged in the process of looking at art and creating art and challenging ideas, formal ideas around why we make what we make. Julia, the founder, each week would set up these projects, these questions, answer these questions. Who are you? Why are you making what you make? Why is it important? Why aren't you doing it a different way? And all of these questions make you step back as an artist and go, all right, it's time to get really serious about this. It's really time to move forward with the practice. You don't want to just keep on making the same thing over and over and over again, because it doesn't do anything for you. We need to grow and develop always to be able to come up with the very, very best.
All of our artists on the programme are working artists, and we wanted to make sure that they had opportunities to kind of put it out there in the real world rather than just think about it and mull it over forever. So it's a sort of like jump right in, very public. I think it's also important to have art spaces in non-traditional ways. I think a public space like Priory Meadow isn't traditionally an art space. So having to kind of engage with the public who aren't necessarily the art public. On the programme, we're working with professional artists. The level of discourse is that we all sort of understand that, or people are at different stages with it, but there is a kind of art language, and having to talk to the public, explain what the work's about, what you're thinking with it, what it's for, is a different kind of way of communicating, and I think it's really important.
You need to be with a group of people who are able to kind of push you forward and say, yeah, it's time to go, it's time to move forward, it's time to kind of do something more. To begin with, I was very considered in the way that I was working. I stood up to the canvas and I mixed paints, and everything was very kind of process-led. I would come in and I would start by mixing up some paints. I'd choose what I was going to do. I'd stand around and kind of observe the work, observe the space, listen to what was going on around me. I was very aware of everything that was going on. These pieces in particular are very precise and they require a very steady hand, and so I had to be in a really good, calm place. So I acclimatized, I think, to what was going on around me and allowed it to be part of my environment. It didn't stop me from working and it didn't change the way that I worked per se, but I think that just as an individual, I had to kind of really kind of come into the space and get used to being in somewhere where people could just walk in at any moment whilst you're working, and having direct feedback, people saying they like it when it's just the background, and you have to kind of be like, well, there's still about 5 or 6 hours worth of work to go into this piece, so I wonder how you'll feel about it as it changes. And some people did come back. So it was more about kind of having immediate reflection, and do you let it change what you're going to do? Well, I didn't, because this series of work is process-led and I kind of know where it's going to go when I start, kind of. But in the second week when I'd actually finished this piece, I kind of enclosed myself off. I had a really strong urge to make a very particular type of work. And I put the tables all round me here and the chair and put stuff on the floor. And I was just down, and it didn't matter what was going on around me. It didn't matter what people thought or if they were looking in. I was just going mad at the canvas and just having a good time, just really enjoying it. And a lot more people stopped. A lot more people stopped to look, and far fewer people came in. They really just kind of left me to it. But it was really engaging for people to see someone in that very visceral state of creativity, because it was new work. It was just thinking, like it was done on paper, and they were more like sketches than finished pieces. And so there's a lot more kind of free energy. There's a lot more kind of that creative power coming out. And I think people could feel it and maybe kind of decided that they would keep a distance from it.
Well, at some point you're going to have to be able to communicate with other people who don't necessarily inherently understand art or what you're doing, and maybe even think it's a little bit weird or challenging. So yeah, I think it's helpful to like stimulate those different types of conversation, and it can be new for some of the artists, and some of them just like run with it and love it, and others are a bit more reserved and then slowly open up as it goes along. There seems to be, with lots of the artists that come onto the programme, a kind of impossible curtain that they can't seem to get through, where it's like, I've made all this art and no one's buying it, or no one's talking about it, and I'm putting it up on Instagram or even on Etsy, or I'm putting it in galleries and nobody's kind of engaging or communicating with it, let alone buying it. And I think that we really underestimate how important it is to have proper conversations with people and kind of engage with them on a personal level, because that's where you kind of meet the art that you want to buy, right? You go and see it and you're like, whoa, I want to live with this object. So it can be a really good start point for that commercial sort of awareness, especially being in an actual shopping centre. You know, there's something I don't know, psychologically supportive about being in a space that is for commerce in a really traditional sense, and then just kind of putting art in there.
People buy the work for all sorts of different reasons. There's a very strong aesthetic value in it, and if that resonates with people, you know, they will just want it. They'll want it on their walls to look at. The largest piece here that was sold, my friend saw it and immediately loved the work. It was that real aesthetic value of it. And now, having had conversations with her, the more that she looks at it, the more she likes it, because it uncovers things very slowly. And so I think you get out of it quite a lot because there are so many elements to it. You can look at a different part of the painting and find something new in it every day. You can find something that's kind of interesting that you hadn't seen before. So it is constantly engaging. It is really nice. And, you know, people buy work for all sorts of different reasons. It's difficult to say why they might want it or what they'll get out of it. I'm very considerate in terms of what I will put on my wall because it is my home environment and I want it to be a reflection of my personality. I'm actually the other way round. When I move into a space, I decide what's going to go on the wall before I do anything else. I really like to know that the things that I'm looking at, the things that I'm surrounded by, make me feel comfortable. They make me feel like me. So those pieces go up first, absolutely. But I think that people do kind of, people rely on the functionality of a home first, and so they put the sofa where they want the sofa and they line it up with the TV, obviously because the room is for watching TV and not for just enjoying as a space. And so that art is like, well, here is a space, let's buy a piece of work that will fit in that space. And again, people choose work for the reasons that they want to choose work, maybe because they like looking at it, maybe something they've had for a really long time and it just makes them feel at home. Absolutely. But I definitely think it can change a space, but pictures mean different things to different people. For me, I absolutely have to have the work that I have handpicked and that make me feel like me and go in the right places. I section my house out to do different things because I work at home, I sleep at home, I relax at home. So I want different pictures in different places to help me feel a certain way or to remind me of the way that I want to feel in that place. So for my work to go into those sorts of places, if you've got quite a bright, vibrant place, it will kind of fit in and it'll be kind of fun. And if you've got a real stripped back place, it will just be this real centerpiece that everyone would be drawn to. So again, it depends on what you want from your home environment when you put a piece of work in there. It is both bringing the inside world out and the outside world in, because my experience of these places are invariably outside, and it is about me showing these are places that I have to go to in order to feel the way that I want to feel, but those feelings come from inside. So they are something that live in here, and it's about me expressing them out. It's just that normally I experience them somewhere else, so they are being brought into the studio space. So I guess it's that combination of both. It won't be a familiar space to me that I'll be working in. So there will both be this visceral outpouring into me putting my emotion into a space, and also, and this is where I feel it, and this is what it looks like and feels like when I'm there. So it will be both that combination of coming from within and coming from without. So it was around the time of finishing these pieces that I found an opportunity to support Hastings Trans Pride. They're an organisation that put together the first Trans Pride event in Hastings just this last year. But in starting this process, they needed to do some fundraising. So they put on an exhibition at a local pub here. So they were asking for submissions from local artists to be part of this. And I thought with the work that I was doing around this kind of gender expression and using the dichotomy of the blue and the pink, that I would make a piece for them. So after some consideration in regards to colour and trying to come away from the original kind of really bright and vibrant works, I started making single colour works, and I chose this beautiful permanent rose pink colour and made a single canvas with that. And it was at the time where I'd kind of finished a lot of my personal development work and was working on identity, and I was working through kind of feelings around gender identity and working around sexuality and all of those things. And I really liked the very easily accessible notion of pink is for girls and blue is for boys. And so I made this beautiful pink piece, and then I made this beautiful blue piece. I remember standing in an art supply shop looking at all the different colours and really taking my time to find a colour that really resonated with me. and I found this beautiful cerulean blue, and this is the very first piece that combines the two together. And it was about saying that balance that I had spoken about through all of the other work isn't just about composition, it's about colour too. And if you can read into that is about gender expression as well, for me that was a really important part of my journey at that time. This idea of both the feminine and the masculine being so important together and well balanced that they need both to be present for me to feel whole and complete and resolved. So the work from here, I took this piece into the art school to do a crit session with it and had everybody talk about the work for half an hour. And I had kind of decided that this was it. This was the piece that I was most happy with, and it was resolved, and that was the series finished. And I took it into the crit session and decided that I should carry on making them because I really liked them, and I got all these nice ideas that came forward from the group. So that moved on to these couple of pieces here that really do lean into this idea of gender identity. In this piece you have the pink shapes sitting over a pink background and the blue shapes sitting over the blue background, and it talks about being the thing that our past or our background expects us to be, and we tend to just kind of blend in and almost disappear. We become invisible. Whereas this piece here is the opposite of that. It transitions between the blue and the red, and it sits on its opposing color, and they stand out a lot more. It's a very different experience. It's about standing out from the past and about being something else, about being entirely who we are, irrespective of what's coming behind that. So the most recent pieces in this series, and the final ones for now, are based on the trans piece that I made for the Trans Pride Hastings event, and they stayed really quite dark. I really, really loved it, but also at the same time, and in communication with Julia from the Hastings Art School, she said, you need to go big. You need to make them as big as you possibly can. And I mean, I have a fairly small studio space, so 100 by 100 was about the biggest that I could fit through the door, to be honest. And it was really transformative for the work because the surface is so much bigger. You have to work in a really different way, and there was a real kind of action element to it. I had to move around the canvases. They had to lie flat on the floor, and I would move around them and kind of tilting these huge canvases to get the backgrounds to work. It was a difficult process and one that I wasn't expecting, actually, but I enjoyed it so much, and they stayed nice and dark. I used shapes in them that I would never have been able to fit onto any of the other canvases, and really just explored what it meant to use a much larger surface whilst capturing all of the other elements that I'd built up over the years to create these two final pieces. One finished 2 days before the show, and one is the piece that I made here in the studio. I was working on this one the whole time. I had done the background at home because it would have been impossible to do it on the floor here. It's far too messy, too much water is needed. But when I was here, these are the single shapes that I painted as I went through. And I just kind of look at what's in the background. I mix up some colors. I think about what feels nice for me. And yeah, have that conversation with people and with myself as I'm going through the process. I was really interested in developing the way that I was using layers in this piece as well. These two are called Unity, Unity 1 and Unity 2, and it's about combining all of the elements. And so in this piece we see that the lines are actually starting to go back behind the shapes, and the splashes are starting to appear in different places, and the wash marks are starting to appear in different places. And so that's everything coming together to make this single image that really, for me, feels like this unified whole. It has the masculine, feminine energy, and it has well-balanced shapes in it. And it has this kind of language that sometimes sits behind and sometimes sits on top. And I'm really excited about these. There will be a few more that come, but I'm going to leave them for now just to give them a bit of space.
It's human nature to want to kind of decorate your space, and as you say, most people will have something purely aesthetic in their home, or something that sparks conversation in terms of being an art piece, something up on the wall or a little sculpture, or anything. And whether you get that from IKEA or you buy it from a gallery, it depends kind of what your interests are and where you're at with that process. And it's difficult because Some of our artists, like Richard, are sort of classically commercial. So in that sense, it's quite easy to throw together a show that looks amazing and that people will be like, oh, I'd love that on my wall. And then other artists are not interested in that process at all. I mean, we work with artists who don't have any interest in selling anything, or who are performance artists, or who are building giant sculptures that realistically nobody's really having in their space. And so it's about kind of working with the artists for their, you know, the intention they have for their work and also what might be commercially viable. So the aim of the art school is to support artists who are working in any medium and at any stage of their career to challenge and develop their existing practice in a critical collaborative environment. We help artists refine their voices and to go on to their next steps, whatever those might be, if it's a residency, if it's developing a solo show, if it's selling for the first time, whatever the next steps are for you as an artist, we'll support you in doing that.